We often imagine the great royal dynasties of Europe as pillars of unshakable stability. When we think of the Habsburgs or the Windsors, we picture centuries of slow, calculated accumulation, institutions that prioritize survival above all else. We assume that to build an empire, one must be cold, rational, and risk-averse. The historical data usually supports this. But in the 16th century, on the frozen edge of the known world, one family defied every single rule of dynastic preservation. They did not build slowly. They exploded onto the stage with a violence that reshaped the map of the Baltic. They were not defined by stability, but by a terrifying oscillation between brilliance and insanity. This is the House of Vasa. From a fugitive skiing for his life through the blizzards of Dalarna to a queen who abdicated her throne to roam Rome dressed as a man, the Vasas were not just kings and queens. They were volatile chemical elements in human form. They took a starving, medieval backwater and forged it into a military superpower that terrified the Holy Roman Empire, only to burn it all down in a fever dream of hubris and paranoia. But here is the detail that most textbooks gloss over. The very trait that made them great, that restless, manic energy, was the exact same pathology that doomed them. To understand the rise of the North, we have to look directly into the eyes of madness. You're watching Empire Unknown, where the past casts long shadows. If you value deep dive analysis into the rise and fall of great powers, subscribing ensures you don't miss the next chapter of this investigation. The story does not begin with a coronation. It begins with a massacre. It is November 8, 1520. The air in Stockholm is damp, heavy with the smell of rain and impending winter. The great square, Stortorget, is packed tight, but the crowd is silent. They are watching the end of their nation. For days, the Danish King Christian II has been celebrating his conquest of Sweden. He has promised amnesty. He has broken bread with the Swedish nobility, swearing that the conflict is over and the Kalmar Union, the fragile alliance binding Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, is restored. But Christian II has a different name in history books. The Swedes call him Christian Tyran, Christian the Tyrant. The gates of the square are locked. The king's soldiers surround the perimeter. One by one, the most powerful men in Sweden are led out from the castle. Bishops, councillors, noblemen. They are not read a verdict. They are simply read a list. Among them is Erik Johansson, a high-ranking noble of the Vasa crest. He is dragged forward. The executioner does not use a clean axe. He uses a sword. The work is messy. The rain mixes with the blood until the cobblestones are slick with a red slurry that flows into the gutters. By the time the Stockholm bloodbath concludes days later, over 80 members of the Swedish elite are dead. Their bodies are burned in a pyre on Södermalm, the smoke choking the city. King Christian believes he has decapitated the Swedish resistance. By killing the fathers, he assumes the sons will be cowed into submission. It is a logical calculation, but it is a fatal error. He missed one. Gustav Eriksson, the son of the murdered Erik Johansson, is not in the square. He is a prisoner, a hostage who has escaped Danish custody, and he is currently a fugitive with a price on his head that guarantees wealth to anyone who betrays him. Gustav is 24 years old. He has no army, no gold, and no allies. His father is dead. His mother and sisters are imprisoned in the Blue Tower of Copenhagen. He is the last remnant of a decimated noble house, standing alone against the most powerful military machine in the north. This is the moment where the Vasa psychology begins to crystallize. A normal man would flee to Germany or hide in obscurity. Gustav heads north into the deep forests of Dalarna. This region is wild, ungovernable, and fiercely independent. If there is a rebellion to be found, it is here among the miners and the lumberjacks. But the reality of history is rarely as romantic as the paintings suggest. Gustav is not greeted as a savior. He is a desperate nobleman in tattered clothes, speaking a dialect the peasants barely understand, trying to rouse tired men to fight a war they have already lost. They reject him. In the parish of Mora, the men tell him to leave. They have traded peace for submission, and they have no interest in dying for a dead man's son. Defeated, Gustav puts on his snowshoes and skis toward the Norwegian border. intending to leave Sweden forever. This should have been the end of the House of Vasa, a lonely death in the snow, an exile forgotten by time. But news travels slowly in the 16th century. Just as Gustav vanishes into the white wilderness, fresh reports reach Mora from Stockholm. King Christian has not stopped with the nobility. He is raising taxes, demanding that the peasants surrender their weapons, and erecting gallows in town squares. The realization hits the men of Dalarna with the force of a hammer. The tyrant was lying. Regret turns to panic. They send their fastest skiers to catch the fugitive. They find him near the border of Salem. They don't find a king. They find a shivering, exhausted young man. But when they bring him back to Mora, something shifts. Gustav Eriksson stops being a refugee and starts becoming Gustav Vasa. He possesses a rhetorical fire, a charisma that borders on the hypnotic. He speaks to the men not of taxes, but of liberty and divine anger. He channels the collective trauma of the bloodbath into a weapon. By January 1521, he has a small bodyguard of 16 men. By the spring, he has an army. The Swedish War of Liberation is brutal. It is not a war of pitched battles and chivalry. It is a war of ambushes in the forest, of Danish supply lines cut by invisible enemies. Gustav proves to be a natural tactician, but more importantly, a ruthless pragmatist. He realizes that bravery doesn't win wars. Money does, and he has none. To hire German mercenaries, the Landsknecht required to break the Danish fortresses. He mortgages the future of his potential kingdom to the merchants of Lübeck. He signs away trade rights, accumulating a debt that would crush a lesser man. He doesn't care. The only goal is victory. On June 6, 1523, Gustav Vasa is elected King of Sweden. The Kalmar Union is shattered. Sweden is free, but the man who sits on the throne is not the same man who skied into the woods. The trauma of the bloodbath and the years of being hunted have forged a personality defined by suspicion. Gustav I is not a benevolent father of the nation. He is a micromanager, a paranoid autocrat who counts every nail in the royal storehouse. He trusts no one. He sees Danish spies in the shadows and treason in a whisper. He looks at his new kingdom and sees two problems. The debt to Lübeck is strangling the economy, and the Catholic Church owns 20% of the land in Sweden. To a pious king, the church is untouchable. To Gustav Vasa, the church is just another rival asset. In a move that shocks Europe, he breaks with Rome, not purely for theology but for liquidity. He initiates the Reformation in Sweden with the efficiency of a bank robbery. Church bells are melted down to pay the German mercenaries. Monasteries are stripped of their silver. The wealth of God is transferred to the crown. He crushes rebellions, even from the very peasants in Dalarna who put him on the throne, with the same cold violence Christian the tyrant once used. When they complain about the new taxes and the loss of their church bells, Gustav does not negotiate. He executes the ringleaders. He establishes a hereditary monarchy, ensuring that the crown will pass to his sons, locking the nation into his bloodline. By the time Gustav dies in 1560, he leaves behind a unified, wealthy, and heavily armed state. He has built the foundation of an empire from the ashes of a massacre. But he also leaves behind something else. In his sons, the trauma and the brilliance of the father have mutated. The stability Gustav fought for is an illusion, because the madness is already in the blood. The old king was paranoid, yes, but he was functional. His eldest son, Erik, is about to show the world what happens when that paranoia loses its tether to reality. The genius of the Vasas has built Sweden. The madness of the Vasas is about to test whether it can survive its own creators. Erik XIV ascends to the throne in 1560, and initially the transition appears seamless. If Gustav was the rough-hewn architect of the state, Erik is the gilded interior. He is arguably the most intelligent monarch to ever sit on the Swedish throne. He speaks Latin, French, German, Spanish, and Italian fluently. He is a skilled musician, a student of astronomy, and a man deeply versed in the Renaissance humanist tradition. To the outside observer, Sweden has graduated from a peasant rebellion to a sophisticated European power in a single generation. But the court insiders see something else. They see a king who consults the stars before he consults his council. They see a man who writes diaries detailing the movements of the planets with obsessive precision, convinced that the alignment of Mars and Saturn dictates the loyalty of his subjects. Gustav's paranoia was rooted in survival. Eric's paranoia is rooted in the abstract. He does not just fear knives in the dark. He fears destiny itself. His first major act on the world stage is a display of this grandiose ambition mixed with a detachment from reality. He decides that he must marry, but no local noblewoman will suffice. Eric sets his sights on Queen Elizabeth I of England. It is a pursuit that spans years, consuming the treasury and the diplomatic corps. He sends shipments of reindeer, turning the Swedish court into a spectacle of desperate affection. He even prepares to sail to England himself, spending a fortune on a fleet that never leaves the harbor. It is a manic episode played out on a geopolitical scale, and while the courts of Europe chuckle, the Swedish nobility begins to worry. They see a king who treats the national budget as a tool for his personal fantasies. But the true danger lies closer to home. Gustav Vasa, in his attempt to secure the dynasty, had given huge duchies to his younger sons, Eric's half-brothers, to keep them loyal. It was a fatal miscalculation. The second son, Duke John, is everything Eric is not. Grounded, politically savvy, and dangerously ambitious. John controls Finland, and he begins to act less like a brother and more like an independent sovereign. When John marries Catherine Jagiellon, the sister of the King of Poland, against Eric's direct orders, the fragile peace shatters. Poland is Sweden's rival in the Baltic, and to Eric, this marriage is not just insubordination. It is high treason written in blood. The conflict escalates with terrifying speed. Eric demands John's submission. John refuses. Eric sends an army to besiege Turku Castle in Finland. The bombardment is relentless. When the smoke clears and the castle falls, Duke John and his new wife are dragged out in chains. Eric does not execute them, not yet. He imprisons them in Grip's home castle, locking his own brother away in a comfortable but absolute darkness. It is a victory, but it does not bring Eric peace. Instead, the removal of the real threat only creates space for imagined ones to proliferate. With John neutralized, Eric's gaze turns toward the old nobility, specifically the Sture family. The Stures had been the regents of Sweden before the Vasas. They carry an ancient legitimacy that Eric envies and fears. In his fevered mind, they are the agents of his doom, the ones the stars warned him about. He begins to compile lists of conspirators based on whispers and astrological charts. The atmosphere in Stockholm becomes suffocating. Men are arrested for smiling at the wrong moment, for whispering in corridors, for the crime of having a surname that threatens the king's ego. This is where the tragedy of the Vasas becomes forensic. If you examine the court records from 1566 and 1567, you see a legal system collapsing under the weight of one man's psychosis. The king establishes a high court, the Haganamden, which functions essentially as a judicial slaughterhouse for his perceived enemies. He accuses the Sture family of plotting to overthrow him. The evidence is non-existent, but the verdicts are predetermined. It is crucial to understand that this wasn't just political maneuvering. It was a psychological breakdown manifesting as state policy. Preserving the truth of these dark, complex chapters of history requires sifting through centuries of propaganda and myth. So if you value these deep dives into the reality of dynastic collapse, your support helps us keep the archives open. By May 1567, the tension snaps. Several members of the Sture family and other high-ranking nobles are imprisoned in the dungeons of Uppsala Castle. Eric arrives, agitated, convinced that a rebellion is breaking out at the gates, though the city is quiet. He enters the cell of Nils Sture, a man who had already been humiliated, forced to ride through the streets of Stockholm with a straw crown on his head in a previous fit of the king's rage. Now Nils is chained. What happens next is the singular moment that defines the madness of the Vasas. Eric enters the cell, dagger in hand. He does not interrogate Nils. He does not negotiate. He simply stabs him. As the young noble bleeds out, the king's guards finish the job. But the bloodlust does not satiate Erik. It breaks him. He rushes from the cell, ordering the execution of the other prisoners, the Sture murders. 5 of Sweden's most powerful men are butchered in their cells. Then the king runs. He does not return to the throne room. He flees the castle, running into the woods, disappearing into the forest for days. When he is finally found, he is dressed like a peasant, rambling, incoherent, terrified of his own shadow. The King of Sweden, the Renaissance prince, has been reduced to a shivering wreck in the undergrowth. For 6 months, Sweden is essentially a republic without a leader. The Privy Council steps in, hushing up the massacre, trying to govern a ship with no captain. Erik is kept in isolation, swinging between catatonic depression and violent mania. During his lucid moments, he is filled with crushing remorse, trying to pay blood money to the widows of the men he murdered. But the spell is broken. The divine right of kings cannot survive the sight of the monarch stabbing chained men and hiding in the woods. The nobility realizes that Erik cannot remain on the throne. But removing an anointed king is not a simple administrative task. It is a theological crisis. They need an alternative. And in the dungeons of Gripsholm Castle, the alternative is waiting. Duke John is released. The dynamic flips instantly. The prisoner becomes the liberator. John, hardened by years of captivity and fueled by a cold, calculating hatred for his brother, rallies the nobility. He is joined by their younger brother, Duke Charles, a man who will play a pivotal role later, but for now serves as the hammer of the rebellion. The brothers march on Stockholm. The capital, tired of the fear and the instability, opens its gates. In 1568, the Riksdag, the parliament, declares Erik unfit to rule. He is deposed and imprisoned, and the crown is placed on the head of John III. The cycle of violence has come full circle. Erik, who once locked John away, now finds himself in a series of increasingly grim dungeon cells. But John is not content with mere imprisonment. He fears Erik's return. He fears the charisma that Erik still possesses, for despite the madness, the common people still love the good King Erik, who ate peas with them and hated the nobles. John III's reign begins not with celebration, but with a cleanup operation. He must stabilize a nation that has seen its leadership decapitated by its own sovereign. John is different. He is not mad, but he is obsessed with theology and liturgy. He dreams of reconciling the Swedish Lutheran Church with the Catholic world, a dream that alienates the staunchly Protestant peasantry and clergy. But while John looks to the heavens for validation, he keeps one eye firmly on the dungeon floor where his brother rots. The end of Erik XIV is a slow, agonizing fade. He is moved from castle to castle, separated from his wife and children, his only companions the demons in his mind and the guards who hate him. He writes on the walls of his cell with charcoal, composing tragic, beautiful music and drawing elaborate sketches of the coronation he lost. He is a ghost haunting his own dynasty. Finally, in 1577, the problem is solved in the Vasa way. Erik dies suddenly after eating a bowl of pea soup. Modern forensics, analyzing his remains centuries later, will find lethal levels of arsenic in his body. It was not a natural death. It was a liquidation. John III, the pious theologian, likely signed the death warrant of his own brother to secure the state. The madness of Erik is buried, but the ruthlessness of the Vasas remains alive and well. With Erik dead, John III is free to reshape Sweden. But the trauma of the Sture murders and the fratricidal conflict has left a scar on the national psyche. The unity Gustav Vasa built is fracturing. And there is another player watching from the shadows, the third brother, Duke Charles. He has watched Erik's madness and John's Catholicism with a critical, predatory eye. He is the most like their father, brutal, efficient, and fiercely Protestant. As John III drifts closer to the Catholic Church, inviting Jesuits into Stockholm and dreaming of a grand alliance with the Pope, Charles begins to sharpen his knives. The House of Vasa has survived its first civil war, but the question of succession is about to become a question of faith. And in the 16th century, questions of faith are answered with fire. Fire, however, can be subtle. It can burn slowly behind the eyes of a painted icon or in the melting wax of a sealed diplomatic letter. While Eric's reign was a chaotic explosion, John III's rule is a slow, suffocating smoke. John is not a warrior king like his father. He is an intellectual, an aesthete, a man who looks at the stark, whitewashed walls of Swedish Lutheran churches and feels a profound spiritual emptiness. He remembers the grandeur of the old faith, the incense, the Latin chants, the gold. He believes that the Reformation stripped the soul out of Sweden, and he intends to put it back. He marries Catherine Jagiellon, a Polish princess and a devout Catholic. This is not merely a political alliance. It is a cultural injection. Through Catherine, the Renaissance flows into the frozen North. But so does the Vatican. John walks a razor's edge, introducing a new liturgy known as the Red Book, a hybrid service that looks Catholic but speaks Swedish. He thinks he is creating a compromise, a bridge between the old world and the new. But in the eyes of the hardline Lutheran clergy, and more importantly, in the eyes of his brother Charles, John is not building a bridge. He is opening the gates to the enemy. The tension simmers for decades. John builds castles, turning medieval fortresses into Renaissance palaces, spending money Sweden does not have, while Duke Charles sits in his own duchy, hoarding wealth, drilling soldiers, and presenting himself as the true guardian of the Swedish people. Charles is the protector of the faith, a title he wears like armor. He knows that John's hybrid religion is unpopular with the peasantry, who view the Latin Mass as witchcraft and the Pope as the Antichrist. Charles waits, patient as a spider, watching his brother alienate the very foundation of the Vasa power base. The crisis point, however, is not John himself, but his son, Sigismund. Born in captivity at Gripsholm Castle while his father was imprisoned by Eric, Sigismund is the child of trauma and ambition. His mother raises him as a strict Catholic, whispering prayers in Latin while his father rules a Protestant nation. This religious duality is designed to make Sigismund eligible for the Polish throne, an elective monarchy that requires a Catholic king. The plan works too well. In 1587, Sigismund is elected king of Poland-Lithuania. He moves to Krakow, leaving his father alone in Stockholm. When John III finally dies in 1592, the House of Vasa faces a geopolitical anomaly that defies the laws of survival. Sigismund is now the king of two empires. He rules the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a massive, Catholic, aristocratic republic in the south, and the Kingdom of Sweden, a centralized, Lutheran, military state in the north. On paper, this is the birth of a superpower, a Baltic empire stretching from the Arctic Circle to the Black Sea. If you appreciate the complexity of these lost empires and want to see more deep dives into how fragile dynastic unions shape history, your support helps keep this channel running. In reality, the union is a ticking bomb. The Baltic Sea does not connect these two realms. It divides them. And standing on the Swedish shore, watching the horizon for the sails of the Catholic king, is Duke Charles. Charles immediately seizes the initiative. Before Sigismund can even return from Poland to claim his Swedish crown, Charles summons the Council of the Realm. He forces the clergy to sign the Decree of Uppsala, a document that definitively outlaws Catholicism in Sweden and cements Lutheranism as the state religion. It is a preemptive strike. When Sigismund finally lands in Stockholm, he finds his authority already shackled. He is crowned, he makes promises to respect the Protestant faith, and then he returns to Poland, leaving his uncle Charles as regent. It is the classic mistake of the absentee landlord. Charles spends the next 5 years systematically dismantling Sigismund's supporters. He uses propaganda masterfully, painting Sigismund not as a Swedish king, but as a foreign invader, a puppet of the Jesuits who wants to enslave free Swedes. He purges the Privy Council. He incites the peasantry. He is relentless. Sigismund, sitting in the distant luxury of Krakow, realizes too late that his uncle is stealing his kingdom piece by piece. In 1598, the Cold War turns hot. Sigismund invades his own country. He lands with a mercenary army of Poles, Germans, and Scots, determined to crush the rebellion. But this is not a foreign conquest. It is a family feud played out with cannons. The two armies meet at Stangebro, near the town of Linkoping. The Battle of Stangebro is a mess of fog and hesitation. Many of the Swedish soldiers on Sigismund's side are reluctant to fight their countrymen. Charles, ruthless and decisive, outmaneuvers the king. In the thick mist, Sigismund's mercenaries are pinned against the river. A truce is called, but the damage is done. Sigismund is defeated militarily, but more importantly, he is humiliated politically. He is forced to hand over his loyal counselors to Charles and flee back to Poland. He will never set foot in Sweden again, though he will spend the rest of his life claiming the title, dragging Sweden and Poland into 60 years of intermittent war. But the true horror of the Vasa legacy reveals itself in the aftermath. With the king gone, Charles is the master of Sweden. He is not yet King Charles IX. He is still just the Duke, the regent. But he holds the power of life and death, and he intends to use it to scrub the board clean. He gathers the noblemen who had supported Sigismund, the legalists, the counselors who believed in the divine right of the anointed king over the usurpation of a duke. He imprisons them in Linkoping Castle. For 2 years, they sit in dungeons while Charles prepares a show trial that mocks the very concept of justice. He acts as the prosecutor himself. When the accused appeal to the law of the land, Charles screams them down, accusing them of treason against the Swedish people. On Maundy Thursday, in the year 1600, the Linkoping bloodbath begins. It is a grim echo of the Stockholm bloodbath that started the Vasa era 80 years prior. The marketplace in Linkoping is packed with silent, terrified spectators. One by one, the grandest names of the Swedish nobility are led out to the scaffold. Gustav Baner, Erik Sparre, Tor Bielk. These are men who helped build the Vasa state, men who had served alongside John III and Old King Gustav. Now they kneel in the mud. The executioner's sword falls. Heads roll into the basket. The blood of the aristocracy soaks into the earth, sealing Charles's authority. This is the moment the Vasa dynasty transforms. Under Erik, the madness was personal. Under John, the conflict was spiritual. But under Charles, the violence becomes systemic. He proves that the crown is stronger than the nobility, stronger than the law, and stronger than the blood ties of family. Charles IX finally takes the crown in 1604, 4 years after the executions. He is an old man by the time he ascends, worn down by decades of plotting and warring. He has secured the state for Protestantism and for his own line, disinheriting Sigismund's branch forever. But the victory is bitter. Sweden is isolated, surrounded by enemies, Denmark to the west, Russia to the east, and now a vengeful Poland to the south. The economy is strained, and the nobility is decimated. Yet, as Charles IX lies on his deathbed in 1611, looking at his own heir, a blonde-haired boy named Gustavus Adolphus, he does not see the ruin of his family. He sees the future. He reportedly whispers a prophecy about his son. "I'll face it. He will do it. He will do what the others could not. He will take the raw, brutalized, militarized state that Charles forged in blood, and he will unleash it upon Europe. The era of internal civil wars is over. The era of the Swedish Empire is about to begin. The Lion of the North is waking up, and the continent is completely unprepared for the storm that is coming. But before the lion can roar, he must inherit a war that is already lost." The boy king takes the throne at 17, inheriting 3 wars simultaneously. The Danes are burning the western coast. The Russians are at the gates of Novgorod, and the Poles are still claiming his crown. Most historians look at the map of 1611 and see a Sweden on the brink of total collapse. They see a failed state ruled by a teenager bankrupt and bleeding. They are wrong. They are looking at the chaos, but they are missing the engine underneath. The Vasas have spent 3 generations refining a very specific set of tools: a centralized administration, a subservient church, and a conscripted army that fights for national identity rather than feudal obligation. The tragedy of Erik, the aesthetics of John, and the brutality of Charles have all combined to create a machine of war that is unlike anything else in the 17th century. It just needs a driver who isn't mad, paralyzed, or usurping power. It needs a genius. Gustavus Adolphus does not start by winning. He starts by surviving. The first years of his reign are a desperate scramble to buy time. He makes painful concessions to the nobility, granting them privileges his father had stripped away, effectively healing the wound of the Linkoping bloodbath to unify the nation. He realizes that to fight the world, he needs the aristocracy on a horse, not on a scaffold. He appoints Axel Oxenstierna as his High Chancellor, a man of cool logic to balance the king's fiery temperament. Together, they are the most effective partnership in political history. While Europe is distracted by the brewing tensions that will become the 30 Years' War, Gustavus is in the laboratory of the North, reinventing warfare. He looks at the heavy, slow-moving Spanish squares, the tercios that dominate European battlefields, and he sees dinosaurs. They are powerful but immobile. Gustavus wants speed. He thins the ranks of his musketeers to extend the line of fire. He introduces light field artillery that can be moved by 2 men and a horse, allowing cannons to keep pace with the infantry. He trains his cavalry to charge home with cold steel rather than trotting up to fire pistols. He is turning the Swedish army into a projectile. But theories are useless without a testing ground. And tragically, the testing ground is Poland. The dynastic feud with his cousin Sigismund has not ended. It has simply moved to the fields of Livonia and Prussia. For the better part of the 1620s, Gustavus Adolphus grinds his army against the Polish forces. It is a grueling, bloody stalemate. The Polish winged hussars are the finest cavalry in the world, and they hand Gustavus several stinging defeats. He is wounded twice. He is almost captured. He learns the hard way that brilliance is not enough. You need discipline. These years are the crucible. The iron that Charles IX hammered out is now being sharpened into steel. By 1629, the Swedish army is no longer a ragtag militia of farmers. It is a professional killing machine, hardened by a decade of constant combat. And the timing is impeccable, because down in Germany the world is ending. The Holy Roman Emperor, Ferdinand II, is crushing the Protestant princes of Germany. The Catholic League is sweeping northward, threatening to turn the Baltic Sea into a Habsburg lake. The Protestant cause is on its knees, begging for a savior. The kings of Denmark and England have tried to intervene and failed miserably. There is no one left, except for the little frozen kingdom in the north. In 1630, Gustavus Adolphus makes the decision that will define the century. He unrolls the map of Germany. He knows the odds. He knows that Sweden has a population of barely 1 million people, going up against an empire of 20 million. He knows that if he fails, Sweden ceases to exist. But the Vasa blood does not do caution. It does destiny. He gathers the estates in Stockholm for a final farewell. He holds his 3-year-old daughter, Christina, in his arms, the sole heir to the empire he is risking everything to build. He speaks to his people not as a tyrant, but as a father bidding goodbye to his children. He tells them he may not return. He tells them that the danger is at the door. Then he boards the ship. The fleet sets sail for Pomerania. The Lion of the North has left the den. And as his boots hit the German sand, the history of Europe pivots on its axis. The question is no longer about who will rule Sweden. The question is whether the House of Vasa will rule the world. Europe does not tremble immediately. In fact, the arrival of the Swedish king is met with an awkward, stifling silence. The German Protestant princes, the very men Gustavus has come to save, are paralyzed. They fear the wrath of the Holy Roman Emperor more than they trust the promises of a monarch from the frozen north. They see Sweden as a peripheral power, a icy backwater punching above its weight. They hesitate to open their city gates, leaving Gustavus and his army exposed, underfunded, and isolated on the coast of Pomerania. It is a moment that would break a lesser man. A rational king might have turned back, satisfied with a show of force before retreating to safety. But the Vasa mind does not process retreat. Gustavus spends the winter entrenching, drilling, and waiting. He knows that in war, moral outrage is often a more potent fuel than gunpowder. And the empire is about to hand him the match. In May 1631, the imperial forces under Count Tilly descend upon the city of Magdeburg. The city had defied the emperor, counting on Swedish relief that could not arrive in time due to the hesitation of the other princes. What follows is not a siege. It is an atrocity that scars the German psyche for a century. The imperial troops breach the walls and unleash a level of violence that shocks a continent already inured to war. The city is torched. 20,000 citizens, men, women, and children, are slaughtered in the streets or consumed by the firestorm. The term Magdeburg Quarter enters the lexicon, meaning no mercy, total annihilation. The news ripples outward like a shockwave. The hesitation of the German princes evaporates, replaced by existential terror. They realize there is no middle ground. You are either with the emperor and subject to his tyranny, or you are with the Swede. Gustavus seizes the moral high ground. He is no longer an invader. He is the avenger of Magdeburg. The Elector of Saxony, terrified and desperate, finally joins forces with Sweden. The stage is set. The Lion of the North moves south to meet the Old Wolf, Tilly. They collide on September 17, 1631, at Breitenfeld. This is the moment military historians point to as the birth of modern warfare. On one side, Tilly's imperial veterans are arranged in massive, lumbering squares, the Spanish tercios. They are like moving fortresses, dense blocks of pikemen surrounded by musketeers, designed to crush anything in their path through sheer weight and momentum. They have been undefeated for years. On the other side stands the Swedish experiment. Gustavus has thinned his lines. He has mixed musketeers with pikemen in smaller, flexible units. He has introduced light, mobile field artillery, leather cannons that can be moved by a single horse or a few men. The battle begins, and the difference in philosophy becomes lethal reality. The imperial artillery is heavy, static, and slow. The Swedish guns are rapid and relentless, firing 3 rounds for every one of the enemies. When Tilly's cavalry charges, they do not meet a disorganized rabble. They meet the Swedish salvo. Gustavus has trained his musketeers to fire in ranks, creating a wall of lead that shatters the charge before it makes contact. The Imperial Saxon allies on the Swedish left flank rout immediately, fleeing the field. By all conventional logic, the battle is lost. Tilly begins to wheel his massive squares to roll up the exposed Swedish flank. But the Vasa genius is fluidity. Because his units are small and disciplined, Gustavus does not panic. He simply pivots. The Swedish lines swing like a gate, refusing to break, meeting the imperial mass with a discipline that defies belief. They fire, reload, and fire again. The massive tercios, unable to maneuver, are trapped in a crossfire of mobile artillery and musketry. The undefeated army is not just beaten, it is dissolved. 7,000 imperial dead litter the field. The road to Vienna lies open. If dissecting these pivotal shifts in strategy and the men who engineer them is why you are here, your support helps us continue excavating these forgotten archives. Breitenfeld changes everything. Gustavus Adolphus is suddenly the most powerful man in Europe. He is hailed as the Golden King, the savior of Protestantism. He marches through Germany not as a conqueror, but as a liberator holding court in Frankfurt, Mainz, and Munich. But with victory comes the old Vasa curse, the inability to stop. The ambition begins to mutate. There is talk of him becoming the Holy Roman Emperor himself. The focus shifts from defending Sweden to reshaping the continent. He begins to believe his own legend. He rides at the front of every charge, his eyesight failing, his body growing heavier, but his spirit burning with a manic intensity. He believes he is divinely protected, but bullets have no theology. By November 1632, the imperial forces have regrouped under a new commander, the enigmatic Albrecht von Wallenstein. He is the dark mirror to Gustavus, brilliant, cynical, and utterly ruthless. He digs in at Lutzen near Leipzig. The season is late. The ground is freezing. Military logic dictates waiting for spring. But Gustavus attacks. He cannot let Wallenstein consolidate. The morning of November 6th is suffocated by a thick, heavy fog. It is a chaotic, blind misery. The armies can barely see each other. The smoke from the burning town of Lutzen mixes with the mist, creating a gray hellscape where sound is deceptive and direction is lost. Gustavus, riding his horse Streif, leads the cavalry charge on the right wing. It is the Vasa way, lead from the front, share the danger. But in the swirling fog, the king drifts away from his main support. He is nearsighted, squinting through the gloom. He finds himself isolated, separated from his regiment, deep behind enemy lines with only a handful of escorts. An imperial corporal notices a well-dressed officer and shouts, "Fire at him! That must be a man of consequence." A musket ball shatters the king's left arm. His horse, maddened by the pain of a neck wound, bolts deeper into the enemy ranks. Another shot strikes Gustavus in the back. He falls from the saddle, one foot tangling in the stirrup, dragged through the mud and blood of the battlefield before coming loose. He lies face down in the dirt, the chaos of the battle raging over him. Imperial cuirassiers surround the fallen figure. They do not know who he is, only that he is an enemy officer. They demand his name. Gasping, coughing up blood, Gustavus Adolphus whispers, "I was the king of Sweden." They finish him with a shot to the head. They strip the body of its buff coat, its jewelry, its weapons, leaving the Lion of the North half-naked in the mud, indistinguishable from the thousands of peasants dying around him. Back in the Swedish lines, the horse Streif returns riderless, its saddle soaked in blood. Panic threatens to collapse the army. The king is dead. The architect is gone. But then, something extraordinary happens. The second in command, Bernhard of Saxweimer, rides through the ranks. He does not hide the truth. He screams it. He turns the despair into a berserker rage. The Swedish army does not break. It explodes forward. They are no longer fighting for territory. They are fighting for retribution. They storm the imperial trenches with a savagery that breaks Wallenstein's lines. They win the field, but they have lost the war's soul. That night, they search the corpse-strewn field by torchlight. It takes hours to find him. When they finally pull his body from under a pile of dead, he is unrecognizable, trampled, and bloody. They have won the Battle of Lutzen, but the era of Swedish expansion is effectively over. The brain that directed the empire is gone. The charisma that held the German princes together has been extinguished. The body is prepared for the long journey back to Stockholm. The heart is removed, placed in a silver casket to be brought home to his widow, Maria Eleonora. The news travels slowly north, across the frozen Baltic, toward a capital that waits for its hero. But the hero is returning in a box. And in the drafty halls of the Tre Kronor castle, a 6-year-old girl is playing. She is brilliant, erratic, and utterly unprepared for the weight about to be placed on her small shoulders. The king is dead. Long live Queen Christina. The most eccentric, intellectual, and controversial chapter of the Vasa history is about to begin. Stockholm does not celebrate the return of its king. It mourns the arrival of a relic. The ship carrying Gustavus Adolphus docks in a harbor locked in gray ice. The city draped in black wool so extensive that the capital's merchants have run out of dye. The body is interred, but the heart, that restless engine of the Protestant cause, does not go into the crypt. It remains above ground, claimed by the widow, Maria Eleonora. And here, the Vasa legacy of genius takes a sharp, macabre turn into madness. The Queen Dowager is not merely grieving. She is unraveling. She locks herself in her chambers, blocking out the sun with heavy drapes, forcing the court to exist in perpetual, suffocating twilight. Suspended above her bed, in a golden casket, is the king's heart. She weeps over it, speaks to it, and, most disturbingly, forces her 6-year-old daughter to sleep beneath it. Christina, the girl king, the future of the empire, spends her nights in the dark, listening to her mother's hysteria, breathing in the stale air of a mausoleum built for the living. This is the crucible in which Sweden's most enigmatic ruler is forged, not on the battlefield, but in a room that smells of wax candles and decay. The State Council, led by the iron-willed Chancellor Axel Oxenstierna, watches this Gothic tragedy with growing alarm. They realize that for the empire to survive, the child must be severed from the mother. In a move of calculated brutality, Oxenstierna intervenes. Christina is removed from Maria Eleonora's custody and placed in the care of her aunt. The separation is traumatic, a wound that will fester for decades, but it saves the monarch. The weeping widow is exiled to a distant castle, and Christina is handed over to the Tudors. Gustavus Adolphus had left explicit instructions before his death. Raise her as a prince, and the Tudors obey. There is no needlework, no courtly dancing, no lessons in submissive silence. Christina is drilled in rhetoric, philosophy, languages, and statecraft. She rides like a cavalry officer and swears like a soldier. She absorbs Tacitus and Plato with a voracious, almost terrifying intellect. While other European princesses are being groomed for strategic marriages, Christina is being weaponized to rule a superpower. She grows up despising her own gender, viewing the traditional roles of women as a prison she has no intention of entering. She is the Lion of the North's daughter, and she intends to roar. But while the girl studies, the war her father started grinds on. It has mutated now. The religious fervor of the early years has dissolved into a cynical, bloody grab for hegemony. Without the tactical brilliance of Gustavus, the Swedish armies rely on the administrative genius of Oxenstierna and the raw brutality of generals who burn their way across Germany. The conflict descends into a slow, agonizing attrition. The Swedish drink, a torture method involving forcing sewage water down a victim's throat, becomes infamous across the continent. The glorious liberation has become a scourge. Yet, politically, Sweden is ascending. Oxenstierna holds the fragile alliance together through sheer force of will, negotiating with the French, playing the German princes against the Holy Roman Emperor. If you find value in uncovering the grim, unvarnished mechanics of how empires are actually built, often on the backs of silent suffering rather than glorious charges, supporting this channel allows us to keep digging into these forgotten archives. The reality of the 30 Years' War is that Sweden emerges as a titan not just through heroism, but through a ruthless, industrialized extraction of resources from the continent. By the time Christina turns 18 in 1644 and assumes personal rule, the map of Europe is being redrawn. 4 years later, the Peace of Westphalia is signed. It is the birth of modern international relations, and Sweden sits at the head of the table. The little icy kingdom on the periphery is now the guarantor of peace in Europe, controlling the Baltic coastline, holding vast territories in Germany, and commanding one of the most feared armies in the world. The House of Vasa has achieved the impossible. They have turned a regional backwater into a great power. But the new queen has no interest in maintaining a war machine. Christina is bored by the tedious logistics of troop movements and grain requisitions. She craves a different kind of conquest. She wants Stockholm to be the Athens of the North. She throws open the treasury doors, not for muskets, but for manuscripts. She invites the greatest minds of Europe to her frozen capital, creating a court that is a whirlwind of ballet, philosophy, and classical drama. She corresponds with scientists and theologians, spending hours debating the nature of the soul while her generals beg for back pay. The most famous of these intellectual trophies is René Descartes. The father of modern philosophy is lured from the warmth of France to the bitter cold of Stockholm to tutor the Queen at 5 a.m., the only time she can spare from her frenetic schedule. The schedule kills him. The early mornings and the harsh, drafty castle give Descartes pneumonia, and he dies a few months after arriving. It is a grim metaphor for Christina's reign. Her brilliance is dazzling, but it is often fatal to those who get too close. Tension begins to coil within the Swedish court. The nobility, enriched by the war and powerful enough to challenge the crown, watches Christina with suspicion. They see a monarch who spends lavishly on art while the peasantry starves after decades of war taxes. They see a queen who creates knights and counts by the dozens, diluting the prestige of the old families. But their greatest fear is not her spending. It is her silence on the one issue that matters: succession. The entire Vasa system relies on lineage. The dynasty is fragile. Christina is the last leaf on the branch. The pressure to marry is immense. Oxenstierna, now old and weary, urges her to accept a husband. Her cousin, Charles Gustav, a stout, martial man who idolizes her father, is the obvious choice. The Senate begs, the clergy prays, the people wait, but Christina refuses. It is not merely a reluctance. It is a visceral, philosophical rejection of the institution of marriage. She tells the council that she would rather die than be mastered by a man. She calls marriage a form of slavery incompatible with her soul. "I was born free," she declares, "and I shall die free." To a 17th century court, this is not just eccentricity. It is a dereliction of duty that borders on treason. A queen who will not breed is a queen who is planning the death of her dynasty. The whispers begin. They say she is mad, like her mother. They speculate about her sexuality, her gender, her sanity. They say she is a hermaphrodite, a changeling, a deviant. The mad genius of the Vasas has manifested in her not as a thirst for blood, but as a radical, destabilizing individualism. She is a woman centuries ahead of her time, trapped in a role that demands she be nothing more than a vessel for the next king. Christina, however, is playing a deeper game. She sees the walls closing in. She sees the grim Lutheran ministers judging her intellectual curiosity as heresy. She sees the nobles plotting to clip her wings. She realizes that she cannot be the philosopher king she dreams of while wearing the heavy crown of Sweden. She looks at the empire her father died to build, the massive military state that Oxenstierna manages with cold efficiency, and she feels nothing but suffocation. And so, she begins to formulate a plan so shocking, so unprecedented, that when rumors of it first leak, the spies of Europe refuse to believe them. The daughter of the great Protestant hero, the Lion of the North, is not just planning to leave the throne. She is planning to defect. She is looking south toward the sun, toward the art of Rome, and toward the spiritual authority of the Pope. The crisis of the House of Vasa is no longer about surviving a war. It is about surviving its own success. The empire has a queen who is too large for the throne, a monarch who views her own crown as a burden to be cast aside. As the year 1654 approaches, Christina prepares her final act of rebellion. She summons the estates to Uppsala Castle. She wears her coronation robes, the purple velvet heavy with silver embroidery, and she stands before the men who have bled for her family for 3 generations. She does not ask for money. She does not ask for troops. She asks to be released. The stunned silence in the hall marks the beginning of the end for the direct Vasa line. The genius that built the empire is now turning inward, preparing to dismantle the very structure of power it created. Christina is about to trade a kingdom for freedom, and in doing so, she will throw the entire balance of Northern Europe into chaos. The lion is dead, the queen is leaving, and the wolves are gathering at the door once again. June 6, 1654. The crown is lifted from Christina's head, not by a usurper, but by her own command. The moment the regalia is removed, she is no longer the monarch who held the intellectual gaze of Europe. She is simply a traveler eager to leave the cold north behind. But as she steps down from the silver throne, her cousin steps up. Charles X Gustav takes the heavy burden of the Vasa legacy onto shoulders that were built for armor, not velvet. He is a man of profound contrast to the queen who preceded him. Where Christina was a creature of libraries and philosophy, Charles is a creature of the artillery train and the trench. He is short, stout, and possesses a restless, kinetic energy that unnerves the courtiers at Uppsala. He inherits a title, a crown, and a catastrophe. The empire Christina left behind is intellectually rich but financially destitute. The royal lands have been sold off to the nobility to fund the queen's court and her abdication settlement. The treasury is echoing with emptiness. Charles X Gustav looks at the ledger and realizes the horrifying truth of the Swedish Empire. It is a shark that must keep moving or die. Peace is a luxury the House of Vasa can no longer afford. To pay the army, he must use the army. The logic of the 30 Years' War has become the permanent logic of the state. He does not look for diplomatic solutions to the debt crisis. He looks for a map. His finger lands on Poland-Lithuania. The justification is flimsy, a dynastic dispute over the Polish crown that dates back to Sigismund III, but the necessity is absolute. In 1655, the Swedish war machine rolls south. This is not a diplomatic excursion. It is an avalanche. History remembers this invasion as the Deluge, a name that captures the sheer, overwhelming violence of the campaign. The Swedish army, hardened by decades of German warfare, smashes into the Polish Commonwealth with the force of a natural disaster. Warsaw falls without a siege. Krakow surrenders. The Polish king, John Casimir, another Vasa relative, flees into exile. It appears, for a brief, intoxicating moment, that Charles X Gustav has achieved the impossible. He has united the Baltic coast under one crown. But the House of Vasa has a recurring tragic flaw. They never know when to stop. The conquest is too fast, too brutal. The Swedish soldiers, unpaid and hungry, loot the Polish countryside with a ferocity that turns the population into an insurgency. The war shifts from a conventional campaign into a grinding, bloody occupation. Catholic Poland rises up against the Protestant invaders. Monasteries become fortresses. Peasants become partisans. Charles finds himself trapped in a quagmire of his own making, winning every battle but slowly losing the war as the country bleeds him dry. If you appreciate the intricate, often overlooked military strategies that define this era, Leaving a like helps support the research required to reconstruct these complex historical narratives. While Charles is bogged down in the Polish mud, the wolves see their opening. Russia attacks from the east. The Holy Roman Emperor mobilizes in the south. And then, the ultimate betrayal. Denmark, Sweden's eternal rival, declares war in June 1657. The Danes believe the Lion of the North is trapped, his claws stuck in the Polish carcass. They expect Charles to be slowly strangled in the south while they reclaim the lost territories in Scania. It is a logical calculation. It is a sound strategy. And it is completely wrong. Charles X Gustav receives the declaration of war not with fear, but with a terrifying kind of joy. Poland was a mess of guerrilla warfare. Denmark is a conventional target. He does something no one expects. He pulls his army out of Poland, abandons the prize he spent 2 years bleeding for, and force marches his troops westward at a breakneck pace. He covers hundreds of miles in weeks, appearing on the border of Jutland like a phantom. The Danish army, expecting a slow, distracted enemy, is overrun. Charles conquers the entire Jutland peninsula in a matter of months. But as winter sets in, he hits a wall. The Danish islands, including Zealand where the capital Copenhagen sits, are protected by the sea. The Swedish navy is trapped by ice, unable to ferry the troops across. The Danes breathe a sigh of relief. The water is their wall. The winter is their shield. But the winter of 1658 is not a normal winter. It is the height of the Little Ice Age. The temperatures plummet to levels not seen in living memory. The belts of water separating the islands begin to freeze. Charles looks at the ice and sees a bridge. His generals call it suicide. They argue that the ice cannot support the weight of cavalry, let alone artillery. To march an army onto the frozen sea is to gamble the entire existence of the Swedish military on the thickness of a sheet of ice. On the night of January 30th, 1658, Charles X Gustav gives the order. The march across the belts begins. It is a scene of surreal, quiet terror. Thousands of men, horses, and cannons move out onto the frozen Great Belt. The soldiers walk in spread formation to distribute the weight. The silence is absolute, broken only by the terrifying groans of the shifting ice and the wind howling across the white void. Every step is a calculation of life and death. If the ice breaks, the empire drowns. At one point, the ice gives way under the king's own flank. A carriage and a squadron of cavalry disappear into the black water in seconds, swallowed whole. The army does not stop. They do not look back. They simply march on, driven by the maniacal will of their king. When the Swedish army emerges from the mist on the shores of Zealand, the Danish defenders are paralyzed by shock. It is a psychological checkmate. An army has walked across the water to kill them. The impossible nature of the feat breaks the Danish will to fight. Copenhagen, unprepared and terrified, capitulates. The resulting Treaty of Roskilde is the zenith of the Swedish Empire. Denmark is mutilated, forced to cede Scania, Bleking, and Halland to Sweden forever. The map of Scandinavia is redrawn in a single stroke, taking the shape we recognize today. The Baltic Sea is effectively a Swedish lake. Charles X Gustav stands at the pinnacle of power. He has surpassed Gustavus Adolphus in territorial gain. He has saved the empire from bankruptcy and humiliation. But the adrenaline of the conquest is a poison. He cannot settle. He cannot govern. He decides to wipe Denmark off the map entirely, breaking the peace treaty just months later to launch a final assault on Copenhagen. But this time, the luck runs out. The Dutch navy intervenes. The city holds. The siege fails. And then, the Vasa curse strikes with its usual abrupt cruelty. In early 1660, while preparing for yet another campaign, Charles X Gustav falls ill. It begins as a cold, then a fever. The man who marched across the frozen sea, who survived the Polish deluge and the Danish wars, is brought low by an infection. On February 13, 1660, at the age of 37, the warrior king dies. He leaves behind a chaotic, overextended empire, a collection of enemies who smell blood, and a son, Charles XI, who is only 4 years old. The Regency Council gathers once again. The cycle of the Vasa dynasty remains unbroken. A brilliant, volatile monarch expands the empire to the breaking point, only to die young, leaving a child to inherit the wreckage. The grandeur of the Treaty of Roskilde hides a terrifying reality. Sweden is now a giant with feet of clay, hated by every neighbor, holding on to provinces that want to rebel, and ruled by a boy who can barely read. The mad genius of the Vasas has built a fortress, but they have forgotten to build the foundation. The greatest test is not conquest, but survival, and the bill for a century of war is finally coming due. For 12 years, the Swedish Empire is not ruled. It is merely occupied. While the boy king Charles XI struggles with his letters, battling a severe dyslexia that leaves him humiliated by his tutors, the Regency Council indulges in a carnival of avarice. At the head of this table sits Magnus Gabriel de la Gardie, a man who treats the state treasury as his personal purse. Under his watch, the austere militarism of the Vasas is replaced by French silk, Baroque architecture, and diplomatic lethargy. The council accepts massive subsidies from Louis XIV of France, effectively turning Sweden into a client state, a mercenary giant kept on a retainer. They believe peace can be bought, that the reputation of Gustavus Adolphus alone is enough to keep the wolves at bay. They are catastrophically wrong. The neglect rots the empire from the inside out. The navy, once the terror of the Baltic, sits in harbor with rotting hulls and unpaid sailors. The army, the very instrument of Swedish power, exists only on paper, its regiments under strength and ill-equipped. When the inevitable storm breaks in 1675, triggered by Sweden's contractual obligation to join France in a war against Brandenburg, the illusion of power shatters instantly. The Swedes suffer a humiliating defeat at Färbellen, a minor skirmish that sends a major signal to the world. The lion has lost its teeth. Denmark sees the weakness. They declare war, seeking to reclaim the Scania provinces lost in the Treaty of Roskilde. The invasion is swift, popular among the local population who still consider themselves Danish, and devastatingly effective. The Regency Council panics, paralyzed by their own incompetence. It is in this moment of absolute collapse that the 20-year-old Charles XI steps out of the shadows. He is socially awkward, poorly educated, and deeply resentful of the nobles who have squandered his inheritance. But he possesses the Vasa trait that seems to skip every other generation, an indomitable, almost manic will to survive. He dismisses the council and rides to the front. The situation is dire. The Swedish army is outnumbered, starving, and demoralized. The winter of 1676 brings them to a frozen field north of Lund. This is not just a battle. It is an execution waiting to happen. If Charles loses here, Sweden ceases to be a great power. The Battle of Lund remains the bloodiest engagement ever fought on Scandinavian soil. Over 50% of the combatants are killed. In the blinding snow and smoke, The young king does not lead from the rear. He charges with the cavalry on the right wing, disappearing into the chaos, fighting hand-to-hand, cut off from his commanders. For hours, the Swedish center buckles, pushed back by the Danish infantry, trembling on the verge of a rout. But the king returns. Having shattered the Danish left, he wheels his cavalry around and strikes the enemy center from behind. The slaughter is industrial. By sunset, the fields are a slurry of red slush. 9,000 men lie dead, but the king stands. Charles XI has saved his crown in a baptism of blood, and the experience fundamentally breaks something inside him. He looks at the carnage, then back at the soft, powdered men in Stockholm who allowed the army to decay, and he decides that never again will he rely on their counsel. If you appreciate these deep dives into the pivot points of history, where the fate of nations hangs on a single afternoon, subscribing helps support the research required to bring these forgotten battles back to light. The war drags on until 1679, ending in a status quo peace that miraculously preserves the empire's borders. But the Sweden that emerges is different. The era of the chaotic genius is over. The era of the machine begins. Charles XI returns to Stockholm not as a conqueror, but as an inquisitor. He convenes the Riksdag and orchestrates a political coup, forcing the nobility to accept a new definition of kingship. He is declared an absolute monarch, responsible to no one but God. His revenge against the Regency Council is methodical and devastating. He launches the Great Reduction. It is a bureaucratic purge of terrifying efficiency. The king's lawyers comb through decades of land grants, arguing that the nobility obtained crown lands illegally or through corruption. The state simply takes them back. Families that had grown fat under de la Gardie are ruined overnight. The wealth of the aristocracy is siphoned directly into the state treasury. Charles XI is not hoarding this gold. He is weaponizing it. He is known now as the Grey Coat King. He despises pomp. He travels the country constantly, inspecting regiments, auditing accounts, measuring the grain in the storehouses. He reconstructs the Swedish military from the ground up, creating the Indelningsverket, the allotment system. It is a stroke of logistical genius. Instead of relying on mercenaries or press-gang peasants who starve when the treasury is empty, Charles ties the army to the land itself. Every group of farms is assigned a soldier. The farmers provide him with a cottage and a plot of land. In return, he trains constantly. This creates a standing army of professional soldiers who are fed, housed, and disciplined even in peacetime. They are the Karolines. They are deeply religious, drilled to march into enemy fire without flinching, and loyal only to the king. Charles XI builds a military machine that runs without friction, a loaded gun kept in the holster. He spends the last decade of his life keeping the peace, carefully avoiding foreign entanglements, letting the treasury fill and the regiments drill. He is the architect who reinforces the foundation that Gustavus Adolphus built and Charles X Gustav nearly collapsed. But the tragedy of the Vasas is that they rarely live to enjoy the stability they create. In 1697, the king complains of stomach pains. It is cancer, hard and unforgiving. Charles XI dies at the age of 41, leaving behind a solvent treasury, a terrifyingly efficient army, and an empire that is, for the first time in a century, stable. He also leaves behind a son. Charles XII is 15 years old when the crown is placed on his head. He refuses to be crowned by the archbishop. Instead, he takes the crown and places it on his own head, a silent signal that his power comes from God alone. The courts of Europe look at this teenager and smile. They see a boy who enjoys bear hunting and reckless riding, a youth who seems arrogant and inexperienced. They see an opportunity. The vultures begin to circle. In the east, a towering, energetic czar named Peter is modernizing Russia, hungry for a port on the Baltic Sea. In the south, the Elector of Saxony and King of Poland, Augustus the Strong, dreams of stripping Sweden of its continental possessions. In the west, Denmark thirsts for revenge for the humiliation at Lund. They begin to whisper to one another. They form a secret coalition, a 3-pronged alliance designed to dismember the Swedish Empire rapidly and completely. They believe they are targeting a weak child who will crumble at the first sign of aggression. They look at the map, at the sprawling, impossible borders of Sweden, and they see free real estate. They are preparing to launch the Great Northern War, confident that the House of Vasa has finally run out of luck. But they have made a fatal miscalculation. They have mistaken the boy's silence for vacuity. They do not know that he has been trained by the Grey Coat King, that he has studied the campaigns of Alexander and Caesar, or that the army waiting in the barracks is the most disciplined killing machine in Europe. They are about to wake a sleeping dragon, and the fire that follows will consume the North for 20 years. The mad genius is not dead. It has merely been refined, concentrated, and passed to a boy who will treat war not as a policy, but as a sport. The stage is set for the final, thunderous act of the Vasa tragedy. Denmark strikes first, but the blow lands on empty air. The coalition expects panic in Stockholm. Instead, they find a whirlwind. Charles XII does not convene a council of cautious elders or seek diplomatic off-ramps. He simply stops speaking, stops smiling, and stops drinking. In a single week, the teenage partying ceases, replaced by a monastic devotion to violence. He leaves the capital, a city he will never see again, and unleashes the Caroline army with a ferocity that stuns the continent. He lands on the beaches of Hummelbæk near Copenhagen, wading through the surf under fire, leading the charge himself. Within 6 weeks, Denmark, a major naval power, is knocked out of the war. The coalition's northern flank has been shattered before the ink on their alliance treaty is even dry. The young king then turns his gaze east, toward the Russian giant besieging Narva. It is November, the ground is iron hard, and the snow is blinding. The Swedish force is outnumbered nearly 4-1 by Peter the Great's modernizing army. Military logic dictates a retreat or a defensive posture. But Charles is a Vasa. Logic is secondary to will. He orders an immediate assault into the teeth of a blizzard. Fortune, it seems, still favors the mad. The wind shifts at the critical moment, blowing the heavy snow directly into the eyes of the Russian defenders. The Swedes emerge from the whiteout like ghosts, bayonets fixed, catching the Russians in a state of frozen terror. The ensuing slaughter is absolute. The Russian army capitulates, losing all their artillery and their pride. In one afternoon, the weak child has dismantled the two greatest threats to his empire. Europe watches in horrified awe. The Swedish Empire is not crumbling. It is apexing. If you find yourself captivated by these turning points where history hangs on the direction of the wind, supporting this channel ensures we can continue excavating these forgotten epics. But here, the Vasa tragedy begins its final rotation. Victory is a more dangerous drug than defeat. Charles becomes convinced of his own invincibility. He refuses peace offers that would have secured Sweden's dominance for a century. Instead, he turns south to punish Augustus of Poland, spending 6 precious years chasing a phantom enemy across the Polish plains, while Peter the Great rebuilds his forces in the east. By the time Charles turns back to deal with Russia once and for all, the window has closed. He launches an invasion of the Russian heartland, aiming for Moscow, but he is marching into a trap that will later consume Napoleon and Hitler. Peter uses the vastness of his land as a weapon, burning crops and poisoning wells, retreating endlessly into the steppe. The Great Frost of 1709 descends, a winter so severe that birds freeze in midair and drop like stones. The Swedish army, the finest in the world, begins to starve. They are reduced to eating their own horses, their uniforms turning to rags, their numbers whittled down by frostbite and skirmishes. The mad genius of the Vasa line drives them onward, refusing to acknowledge the impossible odds. He believes that one decisive battle will shatter Russia again. He finds that battle at Poltava. But this time, there is no blizzard to hide them, and the king is incapacitated, carried on a stretcher after a sniper's bullet crushes his foot. Without his manic energy leading the charge, the command structure fractures. The Swedes charge into a wall of artillery fire. The army is annihilated. The king escapes south to the Ottoman Empire with a handful of men, leaving the flower of Swedish youth rotting in the Ukrainian mud. For years, Charles rules Sweden from exile in modern-day Moldova, orchestrating diplomatic intrigues while his empire is dismantled piece by piece. When he finally rides back to the north, a legendary 14-day sprint across Europe in disguise, he finds a nation bled dry. The Baltic provinces are gone. The treasury is empty. The population is decimated. Yet the obsession remains. He scrapes together the elderly and the teenagers, the remnants of a broken society, and launches an invasion of Norway in 1718. It is a campaign of desperation, a final attempt to seize leverage for peace negotiations. On a dark November night, in the trenches outside the fortress of Fredrikstad, Charles XII inspects the perimeter. He climbs the parapet to get a better view, exposing his head and shoulders to the enemy lines. The soldiers nearby report a sound like a stone hitting wet clay. The king slumps forward, instantly dead. A projectile has entered his left temple and exited the right, shattering the skull. To this day, we do not know if it was a Norwegian bullet, or if one of his own war-weary soldiers, tired of the endless slaughter, decided to end the Vasa madness in the dark. With that single shot, the age of greatness ends. The army retreats immediately. The absolute monarchy is abolished. The Swedish Empire retracts, shedding its overseas territories to become a quiet, stable nation-state. The House of Vasa, which began with a rebel nobleman escaping Danish captivity on skis, ends with a king dead in a trench, his dreams too large for his country to carry. When we look back at the entire tapestry of this dynasty, from Gustav I to Charles XII, we see a distinct psychological profile etched into history. It is a legacy defined by a refusal to accept limits. Gustav Vasa refused to accept that Sweden was a vassal state. Erik XIV refused to accept that a king could not marry a commoner or read the stars. Gustavus Adolphus refused to accept that a small northern nation could not dictate the faith of Europe. And Charles XII refused to accept that reality could not be bent to his will. They were brilliant administrators, art collectors, military innovators, and charismatic leaders. They were also paranoid, volatile, depressive, and prone to catastrophic overreach. This mad genius was the engine of Sweden's rise, propelling a resource-poor nation on the periphery of civilization into the center of the world stage. But it was a fuel that burned too hot. It consumed the very structure it built. The Vasas treated their kingdom not as a home to be tended, but as a weapon to be wielded. Today, the storm has passed. Sweden is known for neutrality, diplomacy, and peace, a direct reaction to the trauma of the Vasa centuries. But if you walk through the Royal Armoury in Stockholm, you can still see the muddy uniform Charles wore in the trench, the stuffed horse Gustavus rode into the fog, and the blood-stained shirts of a family that lived and died by the sword. The empire is gone, dissolved into the maps of modern Europe. But the story remains, a testament to what happens when human ambition is severed from the tether of reality. The House of Vasa did not just rule Sweden. They electrified it, burned it, and ultimately broke it, leaving behind a legend that still echoes in the cold northern wind. This was their glory, this was their madness, and this is their end.